actually waiting on one more person. I'm the moderator. Oh, you. Good morning. Oh, come on now. It's a Friday morning. Good morning. That's it. So good morning and welcome. We have made it to Friday. That's different for me than it is for you. So come on now. Let's. If you look around, I can see and you'll notice that the crowd has thinned quite a bit. But I want to thank those of you that are in this room for remaining here for this important conversation. I am going to go ahead and jump right in. I am actually pinch hitting for my very good friend and colleague this morning, but I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm sure she would have done an illustrious speech and all that great stuff because she knows fundraising, she knows philanthropy, and so she has done a lot to get us prepared for this plenary. And so before I start, I'm going to go ahead and you guys help me thank Jennifer McAllister for setting this up this morning. And so she's up front, so I'm going to, go according to what she's prepared. I'm going to first start off by sharing a few stats. So in a 2015 study by USDA's Economic Research Services, they found that only 6 or 7% of philanthropy goes to rural communities. And so there's a great series of reports by the National Center for Responsive Philanthropy and Grant Makers for Southern Progress that both looked at per capita grant making across the South. And so $35 in the state of South Carolina and $41 in the state of Mississippi compared to $107 per capita for the U.S. as a whole. And so those are very, distinct numbers. And so for decades, the gaps that were filled by the lack of philanthropy and other private investments, they've been mostly filled by federal programs. And so with that tide or that shift coming, it really is incumbent upon us in this work that we do, the sector that we're in, to find new ways to bring resources to rural communities and to support the work that we do. And so, having said that, I am thrilled to be here today to moderate this panel. We have leaders from financial institutions who are thinking about how to better bring CRA-motivated capital and resources to rural communities. And we also have practitioners here on stage who have actually spent lots of time, more than decades, creating new earned revenue streams to support their organizations and communities. And so to get started, please help me welcome Heidi Schoonover, the Managing Director for CRA Strategies and Programs and Initiatives for Truist. We also are joined by Kevin Goldsmith, who is the Managing Director of Community Development, Tax Credits, and Intermediary Lending for J.P. Morgan Chase. We've got Stacy Glenn Short, who is the Senior Vice President for Community Development and Programs. She's with Huntington. And we have Nick Mitchell-Bennett, the CEO for CDCB, Come Dream, Come Build. And then we are also joined, last but certainly not least, by Myra Martinez. She is the Executive Director.
Yeah, CEO. Yeah.
And she's the CEO for Affordable Homes of South Texas. And so would you please help me welcome our illustrious panelists? All right, so we are going to get started by asking, this is just a question to all of our panelists. And so the first question that we want to pose this morning is, how is your organization adapting its funding or investment priorities in response to the recent shifts in federal grant programs? And so I want to start with Myra here first and then work our way back.
So here's where I do my nod to my boss, Bobby Calvillo. Bobby was a great strategist and visionary. So back in 2010, 2011, he started noticing that the federal grants that we were getting from home, from CDBG, and from other sources were on a downward trend over the last several years. And he said, well, we can't have that happen and continue to keep our doors open. So in 2010, he started his crazy ideas, and we've been implementing them ever since. And so starting early, we have diversified, and not only do we have our core service or our core lines of business with single-family homeownership, we're a mortgage lender, we have our own portfolio product, but we also do a lot of fee-for-service, so we do HQS inspection, we get a lot of revenue from that, and other fee-for-service that we do through our counselors and through our some of our other staff. But in addition to that, he created the social enterprises, and we launched a for-profit corporation called Tu Casa Investments. That's the for-profit corporation of 5 social enterprises. And those social enterprises, and yes, at one time it included a sub sandwich shop. We were in the business of making sub sandwiches, Blimpie Sub Shop, which we still miss dearly. The revenue coming in from those social enterprises have really helped us be in a safer position. Not to say we're not worried, not to say we're not concerned, and not to say that we're not trying to figure out how to ride the storm out in our single-family homeownership. But because of the structure that Bobby set up and because of how we've diversified our funding, including our grants, a lot of the grants from philanthropic foundations and CRA, banks really like the idea of what we are doing in terms of thinking outside the box and bringing extra revenue in, so they've helped us with that as well. But because of that, we're about 14 months of solid operating support that if we don't make any single dollar, we can still keep the doors open and going for 14 months. Which, yes, to Bobby. But, and so it's a lot of that. It's a lot of continuing to be strategic and being careful not to chase the dollars either, because, our time is valuable now, and we have to make sure that what we spend our time on is going to be impactful quickly. We don't have the luxury of time anymore like we used to, and we have got to figure things out a little bit quicker. So that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of what we've been up to.
All right, thank you. Heidi.
So I would say, holistically, our strategy hasn't really shifted much, and I think it sort of speaks to what we've already heard, that this is not our first rodeo with an economic downturn of some form or fashion. So we've really been focused for a while now on working with our partners on that diversification of sources of funding, whether that's revenue generating, whether that's federal grants, local grants, whatnot. I think where we've probably shifted priorities is making sure that we're engaging more frequently with our partners to stay updated on what they're experiencing, what their communities are experiencing, so that we can be a part of those conversations, and we're not being reactive to our communities, but rather being there to help support through solutions. In full transparency, we are looking at the financials more closely of the organizations that are requesting funding from us. As you might imagine, from a grant funding perspective, we've seen a significant increase in the number of organizations coming through the Truist Foundation to request funding. So we're really evaluating what are they requesting funding for, and is there a long-term sustainability strategy behind the grant that we're looking to make. We're looking at our current portfolio and having conversations with our partners where there might be federal funds tied to some of those projects to make sure that, again, that we're being proactive in those conversations and that nobody's surprised at any point. But I think it's really just staying engaged in the conversation versus pivoting to an entirely new strategy.
Good morning, everyone. Kevin Goldsmith with JP Morgan Chase. It's really a pleasure to be here, and wanted to thank the Housing Assistance Council for the invite and hosting this great conference. In response to the question, we're really trying to be nimble. There's a lot of challenges with different funding sources right now as we're going through a changing political environment. And we're trying to really be responsive to what our clients' needs are. We've always had, as far as our firm-wide approach, both from philanthropy as well as the businesses, kind of 4 pillars of priority. One being small business, another being financial education, a third being workforce development, and the fourth being community development. And community development really kind of gets broken into 2 additional pillars. One is vital institutions. So think of, what are the vital institutions in a community, whether it be the healthcare systems, the educational systems, or other nonprofit partners in the community. And then housing. So those 2 components of the community development. And so affordable housing is a large part. And so when we're looking at, our philanthropic work and how we're supporting the community, again, trying to be responsive to the needs, especially in a changing environment, but also in supporting innovative approaches or new approaches that some of our nonprofit partners are taking to fill gaps or to develop truly affordable housing. And so we really appreciate feedback from all of those partners and from you all on what is needed and how we can be best investing dollars to support.
Good morning. I'm Nick Mitchell-Bennett with CDCB. So the C-suite at CDCB, we take turns standing on the corner Monday through Friday. So a conference like this, really cutting into it when I have 3 of us here. So trying to get as creative as possible, but hat in hand and pass the boot type of stuff. No, I think along the lines as Myra, when we're both from the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, and for a long time nobody even knew where we were, and who we were. So this entrepreneurial spirit has really been born into each of our organizations. And so there is some type of revenue generation in most of the products that we put out. So we're a licensed mortgage loan, mortgage company in the state of Texas, which allows us, there's lending fees, we're loan servicer, servicing fees when we sell loans. There's, service release fees that come in through that. We're also a construction company. So building all of those, not profit maximizing on any of these, but building in the fees that keep that coming in. CDCB over the last 3 years is about 15% of our revenue is from the federal government. And most of that is in our school and our youth build program. So that's a little bit worrisome, but I'm always thinking about something new. So Dream Build is our newest attempt at keeping things moving forward. And in Dream Build has been, and some of the folks on the stage have invested in Dream Build. We're now making money. We actually hit profit for the last 3 months. And so sometimes it's having to invest and wait and hopefully do it right so that you are then in the positive. And then our next thing that we're doing, we're taking our youth build program and actually transitioning it into a charter school, because we don't know what's going to happen to youth build as a funding source from the Department of Labor. But we do know that charters are big and private schools are big politically, whether you agree with that or not. I don't, but anyway. But hey, the money's there and it's legal, so I'm going to go get it. So it's always thinking about how can we continue to do that to serve the people that we're serving.
Hello, I'm Stacy Glenn Short with Huntington Bank. I won't belabor many of the points that I agree with from my fellow panelists, but the one thing that I'll say, I think the past 5 years have taught us to flex, and so it's sort of prepared us for the moment that we're in today. We're sticking with our roots, and we're really focusing individually on each project that comes our way, and also working through our 105 communities that we serve and their needs. So remaining flexible, finding different ways, unique ways, just like we did the prior 5 years, has really continued and will continue to be our focus.
Great, great, thank you. I really love the idea or the thoughts that came out of the practitioners on the panel. What Myra said about being careful not to chase the dollars, and then Nick conversely saying, go get it, really speaks to me. And so I'll shift gears and I want to ask a question to shift gears to those comments. So then, but this question is to you all. What defines a promising or compelling funding opportunity then in your view? And so I want to hear first from the funders and then the practitioners. So Stacy, would you start off?
Sure.
Thank you.
I would say it goes back to understanding the project itself, the needs that it will address, and then that the project actually will address the needs, right? So we do like to do some of the projects that are new and innovative, and we don't have high expectations of them actually delivering what we're hoping it will, right? Because it's something new. But again, going back to understanding the needs, who's involved, who's engaged, is really where our focus has been. And each project is so different, each community is so different, that to look at an affordable housing project in one box and have the same expectations for every affordable housing project across multiple different types of communities would not be the best approach. So we really literally take every project that comes before us, look at it individually, look at the funders that are participating, look at the goals of that particular project and all the different impacts it hopes to have, and then we move forward accordingly from there. One of the other things that we do that I don't think is unique to any of the funders, but banks tend to be really good conveners, and we can convene a lot of different types of organizations and industries. So often we have many customers who want to help and want to have an impact on their community, but they're not a lender, so they don't know where to start. So knowing and understanding the customers we have in each of our communities that are also like-minded and want to see their communities thrive and grow, we're able to bring people to the table who have an interest, and maybe they can be the funder while we're the lender. And because they're funding a portion that typically people would come to a bank to fund, we're able to reduce our interest rates more on part of the deal or things like that. So again, you can't do those things unless you look at each project individually, and really that has been our focus.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So I mentioned the pillars. But they're very broad, right? Like you can fit a lot of things into those pillars of importance for us. But similarly, we're really trying to understand what the local community needs are, and we do that through working with partners. I actually sit in the commercial bank and community development banking, and my teams, I have the responsibility of our team doing national investing under new market tax credits, historic tax credits, and CDFI lending. And so our CDFI partners are extremely important partners to help us understand what the capital needs are in an area, and also kind of what the technical assistance needs might be for that community. One project that I'll highlight would be recently we invested in the Uvalde school rebuild and building a whole new school in Uvalde, Texas, using a new market tax credits with several national and regional CDFIs and other partners there. That was obviously that need is very unique to that community and to that situation, that tragedy that occurred. But that's what we're trying to be responsive to. Another CDFI partner that we worked with that I was just speaking at the breakfast table earlier is working with Rock USA, right? Like, I think where we're oftentimes perceived as a New York bank, but we work nationally. We have branches in all 48 states, and really partnering with local CDFIs and CDFIs that are in the community, understanding what are the challenges of resident-owned communities and how we can provide capital to help a CDFI that's really working on on behalf of those residents is something that we're trying to be responsive to and learn from others to really deliver those impacts that are local to the households there.
So first off, I'm going to say hopefully by deduction of just whatever, you figured out that I'm Heidi Schoonover with Truist, because I realized I forgot to introduce myself. Clearly, my breakfast table is getting confirmation I'm not a morning person. But part of me just wants to say ditto to everything that was just said. But I want to lean into something that Stacy said, and that is the convening part. So oftentimes what we find in our smaller, whether it's a really small suburban or, quite frankly, rural community, is that we need more people at the table to make that deal work. We need to be looking at projects more holistically. So it might be that, yes, the project is affordable housing related, but how can that property also be utilized to help meet additional needs within the community? And can we bring others to the table who have a vested interest in that community thriving, whether they operate within that county or individuals from that county drive one county over to, seek medical attention or work or that kind of thing. So I think that's something that I try to tell partners is bring us into the conversation early, because we can help you think through who else should be at the table as part of this conversation. We've got a lot of CDFI partners who may not have a bricks and mortar operation in your community, but they serve your community. Can we leverage them to help make the deal more economical? Can we bring in philanthropic funders who have a desire to invest in this but don't know about your community for whatever reason, because they themselves are stretched thin? So I think we're always looking at where we can be a convener and where we can have more collaboration on projects. Obviously, anything that's innovative we want to look at. And when I say innovative, it doesn't have to be that it's never been done. It could be it's just innovative to that community. Yes. They've never been offered this type of opportunity, and so can we be a partner in potentially making that project move forward? So.
I might add one thing that we didn't mention, and maybe it's obvious to everyone, but we also partner together.
Oh, yeah.
So there might be a project that I know that Chase or Truist will have a better product for, and when in the community space, we are competitive sometimes, but we really, our goal is to make certain we bring the right product and program to the community, right? So often I'll pick up the phone and say, hey, there's this really cool idea, but there's no way I can do it, or I can do part of it. Will you join in the project? So when we convene, we really mean convening all types of partners.
Yeah, I'll share an example of that. So in a small rural community in North Carolina, they needed a complete revamp of their water sewage system. And there was a local community bank that also operated in that community that was looking at the deal and was interested in doing it. But legally, they could not lend the full amount. And so we were brought to the table, and our government finance team said, yeah, we can actually be the lead. And that small community bank can still have a role in the deal, but stay within their legal lending limits for how much they can lend into any specific project. So yes, I mean, oftentimes we need our peers at the table, especially for a large, complex deal, to make it work.
Great. So we're going to go to the practitioners now, Myra and then Nick.
So let me just start by saying that Nick's just built different. But I think it's a great, I think it was a great idea to have two organizations from the same area up here to speak from a practitioner's point of view, because Nick and I are about an hour and 15 minutes maybe away.
Depending on traffic. We have traffic every once in a while.
Yeah, once in a while. We're about an hour and 15-minute drive from each other. Same border, but we serve very different communities. We go about things very differently, and so you're going to hear quite a bit of differences between Nick and us. Not that that's bad. It's not. But I think that you could use it to say, okay, well, maybe I'm not quite as adventurous as Nick, and maybe I don't want to be quite as conservative as affordable homes, and maybe I can find something in the middle. But for us, we've been really diligent on when we look at funding sources. So when I say chase the dollars, we want to make sure that we're not chasing these dollars that are not advancing our mission or advancing affordability. If we have to go create a whole new program and learn everything for something that's a small amount and in the end doesn't really contribute, that's just a waste of our staff's time and a waste of our resources. That doesn't really contribute much to the bottom line. So we're very much aware of what it wants us to do, what the funding opportunity wants us to do. We're also very focused on what outcomes and metrics the funder wants. So if they're offering an opportunity, and this is just an example of single-family home ownership, they want you to do 75 homes in a year. But right now, with the times and the market being what it is, we're only doing 50. You're already setting yourself up to not meet the funding the requirements of that funder, and then you could lose a potential funder. So we do go back and we try and negotiate with the funder, and we say, this is what the reality is. Can we talk about these metrics? Can we measure in another way that you can prove your impact through your investment, and we can still use these to advance our mission? A lot of times we have been able to do that, and sometimes we haven't, and that's okay. And then we make a decision whether we continue it or not. But I think that the metrics is really something that we've been looking at a lot. I think the funding opportunity, sometimes the money is the big attract flash, kind of like, oh, this is $1 million, and you really have to read through the details because again, at the end, you don't want to set your staff up or your organization up for failure. And as tempting as $1 million is, if you know you can't produce, and you know you're not going to be able to meet that, I would just, my opinion, put your resources somewhere else, because that's another thing that we're very diligent about in this year, is where we spend our time. Our staff time has become very valuable. And when I say we don't have time to figure things out, we've implemented a fail fast, fail cheap mentality. Let's do it quick. Can we do it? Within 30 days, we figure it out. Can we do it or not? And if we can, let's do it. If we can't, cut it off and move on to the next. And I think that that's really helped, one, energize our staff and finding opportunities that maybe we hadn't thought about before, but also giving them a sense of, it's okay, we don't have to do every single thing that we think of or every single thing that is out there. We can choose to see what makes sense. We can choose what we want to do and see what makes sense for us. And I think that's been one of the biggest, areas for us, for our staff, and for us this year.
It's kind of weird to be answering the same question as the funders. So the Partners for Rural Transformation put together a study, which is what we refer to as the Rural Funders Guide. And I was really excited to hear the three of you all kind of mention some of the things that are on this guide, because that's what drives us at CDCB when we're going after capital, whether it be loan capital or grant capital or some sort of investment in what we're doing, because like Myra said, it keeps us focused. And it allows us to have a deeper conversation with those who are investing in our community. So obviously groups like everybody in the room, we ask funders to help us put community voice first. What does the community want? And so all three of you said, we want to invest in stuff that is working locally. Which is really exciting to hear. And then along those lines are supporting regional approaches. A lot of the stuff that we all do as rural housing providers, sometimes it's like 4 units, right? But then there's 4 units another 20 miles away and another 4 units, and right. So what's that region? And can we all come together like we have with HAC come together and do a bigger project that makes it more appetizing to y'all to come into this, and then and make it work for both of us. So thinking regionally and how that works, and allowing us to, community adaptability and your money adapting to what, and I don't mean like us adapting to you. Sorry, I know that a lot of times you want us to adapt to what your money works like. But I'm not going to start speaking English most of the day. We speak Spanish in Brownsville. So adapting with us and adapting with the needs that we have, and I think, the three that are with us today, funders today, I think you have all shown how to do that. But really, overall, is really like, as we've done at CDCB or Partners for Rural Transformation and HAC, it's like what's important to us, just like Myra said, and letting these guys know. Sorry, you're proxy for everybody else out there that I'm pointing to. But letting the funders know, this is who we are, this is what we believe in, this is where we want. Do you want a piece of this? And I know it's so hard when you're like, I'm looking at a $500,000 deficit this year. And so I am not saying that I would love to be able to say, well, no to that one and yes to that one. I know it's not always that easy. But if we can train these guys to do what we're asking them, then maybe it might work. And the thing is that they are, banks that are sitting at the table and foundations that are out there, they are, rural is where it's at right now. And we need to kind of fly that flag and make sure that they understand where we're coming from and being very clear about it. And, not being, it's kind of this not movable, but really making sure it's clear that this is what we need. This is what our clients are telling us. This is what and understanding what your clients are. And a lot of us kind of do what we do when we don't. Sometimes we don't even understand what clients are, what those needs are. We see. So some of you know Daniel Elkin, who's my chief strategy officer. There's a group of folks on his team who read the notes for all of the housing counseling clients once a quarter, or they would test and they read as many as they can. But then they're looking for the themes of what is in their conversation with the counselors about what's going on in their economic lives and in their housing lives. And so really, really understanding that, because I can assume that it's this, and it may have changed over the last 6 months, but no, this is really, and what are those themes, and are we focused on those themes? Typically the same thing, I'm poor and I need a place to live, but how do you really understand what's going on? And then presenting it to these folks and saying, this is what the need is, here's the evidence that shows this, can you invest in this?
Great, thank you. Nick pointed out that he was answering the same question as the funder, so I'm going to shift away from that for this next question.
You guys get to go from our point of view.
And I'm going to ask the funders a question. One of the common themes that I heard from Heidi, Kevin, and Stacy were all thinking about understanding the needs of the community and collaboration, or convening, being those strategic thought partners, going in early on the different projects. And so as you have those thoughts, I think most folks would then want to know, what advice would you then really give to rural organizations who are looking to align their CRA or mission-driven investment goals with your needs or your priorities? And so I'll start with Stacy first.
So first, I want to say, especially in rural communities, but across Huntington's 105 markets, CRA is kind of akin to a four-letter word. We don't talk in terms of CRA within our group, and I think many of us feel the same way. It's about community development and what the community needs. So I think the first thing that I would say is just making certain that the project for us is what the community needs and that there's buy-in throughout the community. We like to lead with the community's voice first and not necessarily think we have the answers to everything. So we try to keep our products very simple and easily adaptable, and then come to the community to understand what will work best and then making certain all the stakeholders are at the table and everyone agrees. So for us, it's really understanding what the need is, that the project will address the need, and then who all is at the table and agrees with that, yes, that is the project we want our community to focus on. I think with rural communities, and so I grew up in Ohio, I still live in Ohio, and I still live in my hometown, and currently my city has 600 people in it. So, and we don't have cable or internet. I get my internet from a satellite from a silo from the city north of me. But the thing is when a project is available in one of our rural communities, it is like the project for 5 years, right? And so making certain that it is the project, right? The one that's really gonna move the needle for the community and everyone is focused on it, I think is really how we ensure there's alignment.
Great, thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, I know I would totally agree with those points. You know what? Similarly, at J.P. Morgan Chase, like CRA isn't driving what we do. Like there's no like map that says, hey, you need to do something here. If we are being responsive to the community, then we feel like we are going to be able to achieve and receive an outstanding award on our CRA exam. The exam itself like does have quantitative and qualitative components, right? And so quantitative, there's a lot of things that start moving the CRA goal. And I just get some insight into this because I've been in the bank for 19 years. And so the quantitative stuff, you know, you get like home mortgage lending, you get business banking lending, and then, but that's all quantitative. There's also the qualitative part of the exam. And I think that sometimes is underappreciated how much value the regulators put into the qualitative component of what the bank is doing and how we are working with partners and listening and trying to be responsive to. So, you know, helping us in identifying what projects are going to be responsive to the community needs and then helping us tell that story is something that I think all banks generally greatly appreciate because it helps them with their qualitative component of the exam and discussions with the regulators.
So I 100% agree with everything that's just been said. You know, yes, we have CRA goals and objectives, but at the end of the day, if we're serving our community appropriately, we're going to maintain our outstanding rating. It's just kind of that simple. Don't tell my boss I said it's that simple, otherwise my job may be eliminated. But I would say what I would add to that is, Stacy hit on it. You know, when we're working in rural communities, that is typically the project. That is what everybody is focused on. And what I would encourage organizations as you're planning for that project and you're getting that local buy-in and you're having those conversations is to look at who are the financial institutions that are operating in that community. That's going to be who has a CRA obligation if you want to lean into that. So look at, you know, who has a branch in that county or in that city, and bring them into the conversation early. I would say that's probably one of the biggest issues that I see is that there's a lot of work that's being done, and then all of a sudden you're reaching out to funders and you're trying to get them all caught up. And if you bring the funders into the conversation early, they can be a part of the conversation about what are realistic goals and objectives for that project. Is 75 homes really realistic? If we get there, great, but should we make it something that's closer to 50 based on where we think this community is going over the next 3 to 5 years? I would also say look at, it's the second part of your question, those mission-driven organizations. So think beyond just financial institutions when it comes to funding opportunities. Look at, and this is really critical, I think, for rural communities where maybe there's not an industry outside of agriculture. Individuals who don't work for the local government or don't work, you know, in some form of agriculture, where are they going to work? So are they leaving the county and they go into the next county over to work for somebody else? bring them into the conversation. Like say, hey, I know you don't physically have bricks and mortar in this county, but X percentage of your workforce lives here, and start having those conversations to bring them along. And I think it just makes for longer term a better project. And quite frankly, you have more people at the table that are willing to invest.
That's really great to hear. I love the idea, not going to tell your boss that you said so. I love the idea that we talked about it really not being CRA driven. And I'm pretty sure that Nick and Myra sort of know that because you guys do have so many entrepreneurial or other type funding sources. And so to Nick and Myra then, my question is, thinking about it not being so CRA driven, how can then rural partners position their projects or organizations for stronger engagements than with the banks or other philanthropic capital sources?
Nick, why don't you go first?
I have no idea. Yeah. So sometimes with like going to the local bank, sometimes we don't have banks in our communities, and so and so thinking, kind of answering that question. One more time, Terry.
How can rural partners position their projects or organizations for stronger engagement with banks or philanthropists?
Yeah. So I don't care. I mean, honestly, I do. I want to make the investors happy, and I really do. I mean, if it's True, if it's Chase, if Huntington, whoever, Wells Fargo, whoever the case may be. But honestly, we really need to, like, to Myra's point, if we're very clear on what's important to our communities, and I'm not, and I understand, I get it. It's like, gosh, I can't be that pure about things, Believe me, I'm not the guy that's pure about things. But it's really putting forward what's your community and saying to Kevin, do you want to be a part of this? This is what's needed in Appalachia. This is what's needed in the Delta. This is what's needed, in the Navajo Nation. This is what's needed. And do you want to be a part of this? This is the information that we have that says this is important in the San Joaquin Valley. And this is where we think you need to invest, wherever you're at. And so being completely tied into what you're doing and the folks you're serving and speaking for those people with a pure heart and mind and getting back and sitting in the room with these guys and putting together a good financial package for the projects that you're doing. It's not, come to the table ready to go, and say this is what's important. This is what we need to do. We cannot continue to build houses the way that we've been building them in the Rio Grande Valley for the last 250 years. We're moving into modular housing. We are building our own factory. Do you want in? And we're going to employ this many people, and we're going to build this many houses. It's going to take me 5 years to get to this point. And Kevin and his team stepped up. So that, but it's really, you, and I think everyone in this room, I'm preaching to the choir, so I'm not preaching, I'm like leading a choir here, right? It's like, know exactly what's going on in your community, and you all do, and be able to present it to these folks, because they're hungry for this stuff. They really, really don't want to have to go looking for it, and they shouldn't have to. Like, literally, these folks should have a list of people to call with projects that they've got. I got 15 that I'm interested in at Huntington. I can only do 3, but they know that you're out there. And when, I loved it earlier with the part where it was like, well, maybe we can't do all this together, and or we can't do this, and let's, I think you mentioned about bringing in somebody else. Ask these guys, well, who else will do this? So you like this, you got 50% of this. Who else amongst your friends that you go to dinner with and have drinks with, who else wants to be a part of this? Don't be afraid to ask that. And I don't think any of you are, but it's just understanding, making sure that they know about it. I mean, the reason I come to all these things is because I got to get in front of everybody, and I'm tired at the end of the day, just like you guys are when you're at these conferences, right? Because you're out there talking to people, making sure they know what you're doing, and that your people are the most important people in the face of the planet, and they can feel that. They can feel like that's a good investment because he is so sold on this. I mean, they also say he's crazy, but I think that's the way that we look at it at CDCP.
Yeah, I don't know how I can, if I have anything to say after that, but,
Sorry, Myra.
no, you're good, you're good. And I love Nick, for the record, I love Nick. But I think that it comes down to, I think, a few basic facts. One is funders have to respect how rural communities work. And I think that that is communicated through relationships. And we talk about AI and, all of this, but at the end of the day, the human-to-human relationship is still what makes the deal, is still what makes that funding opportunity a reality. And so it's that, that relationship building, that talking, that planting a seed. Maybe not, the first time you meet them, planting a seed. The next time you meet them, you water it a little bit more, and so forth. The other, I think, fact is, and this is based on going off of what Nick said. When I say that Nick is built different, and I mean that in a very complimentary way, but if you notice the way that he speaks, he doesn't. It's not go to funders, hands out for us, and a sob story, and we'll do whatever you want. We just need the money. He's turning the tables, and in that conversation, he's saying, "You're going to miss this opportunity. You're going to kick yourself in the butt for missing it, because this is a great opportunity that we have for you to invest in." And I think that's the mentality shift that a lot of nonprofits, especially in rural communities, need to have. That your project, your community is worth the investment. And it's communicating that to your funder. It's not being afraid to communicate that. And you're going to do it, obviously, respectfully, but you want to communicate that. You want to communicate that urgency that says, if you pass this up, someone else is going to do it. And they're the one that's going to get, the accolades or the whatever, funders get at the end. Whatever the positivity is. And I think that is a huge shift that we need to have mentality-wise. It's okay to promote your organization, your community as an investment worth investing in, and they need to get in on this before it, time runs out.
Can I add something to that? I think they both hit something on the head. So Nick said, we could have 15 projects that we're looking at. It is, who do I have a relationship with, and who do I know has the passion to get the project done?
Yeah.
Because I've been in this world for almost 3 decades. I know I don't look it, but just kidding. I look every bit of it. I'm just going to be honest. No amount of makeup. But I would say, my husband's former military, so he says this to me all the time. The plan is good until first contact, and then it just goes whatever way it's going to go. And I did commercial real estate lending for a long time, and I don't think I had a single project that from start to finish went the way it was outlined on paper. That's why you have contingencies built into the budget. So when we're looking at these opportunities, we're looking at not only the financial side of it, but at the end of the day, who's going to stay in that project to make sure it gets done, and it gets done the way the community needs, not just the way it needs to be done on paper.
I think, Heidi, you pulled at something that I heard from both Nick and Myra, and I might be incorrect here, but in addition to having a good project laid out, all the pieces, all the finances structured, it is about the partnerships and the relationships not to say that people, give to people, but kind of, sort of. It really is that passion of the organization that's doing the work. And so I think a lot of groups really could benefit from hearing, more of that, or hearing it said more often, because they're just, sort of chasing it, making sure that their proposals are written right, making sure they have the right finances, but just to really stop and make sure that we are really nursing those strategic partnerships and those collaborations and bringing people into the table. If you didn't hear it, like, there it is, but that's one of the things that I heard. And so thinking about that then, and Nick, I know you hate the questions for all, but I'm gonna go there again. Gonna go there again.
You never do what I ask anyway, Terry, so why?
Well, I'm gonna come to you first then, how's that?
All right, I get to control this.
All right, so the question then, for all of the panelists, and then I'm gonna, bring it back down because we're almost at time, but I do have this one question I wanna ask before the last question, is what opportunities then do each of you see for growing capital beyond traditional grants making, if you're thinking about, those partnerships and strategic collaborations? So Nick, you're first.
Well, first off, I would like to see grant capital grow. Period. So yes, we need to look beyond that, but I would be remiss if I didn't look at the three folks on the table with me, as well as the other funders in the room, and say, don't stop giving, actually increase. So that's just number one. That's the easiest. It's not easy, but that's the best way for rural communities like ours to keep moving forward and through this time. But beyond that, I think one is partnerships, and I mean partnerships amongst us. Like, how do we work together as organizations, even if you're on two different sides of the country or this region. But I think that would be. As much as people think that I'm kind of this rogue person out there being nuts, there's a lot of folks that we partner with, and I mean that in like, we borrow money from, we lend money to, we do projects with. Tom Manning Beaving's in the office here today, and we're moving Dream Build into Kentucky with him. I think it has to do with the fact that we both took our wives' last names, so we kind of understand Manny Beaven and Nick Mitchell Bennett. But find what that is that drives you together, and figure out how to work together. We borrow money from HAC, and so these strategic partnerships. When I started self-help housing in the Rio Grande Valley in 19. Longer
19.
than you've been into this. Sometime in the 1900s, I went and spent 3 days with Peter Carey and Tom Kalashaw and drove around the Central Valley, and they just downloaded everything they knew about self-help into this empty brain of mine, and said, go back and do this. It's going to be us working together. But the really cool thing is, these guys like to see that. They love to see that. And so I would say, beyond give more and more, would be work together to increase the outcomes for that.
Great. Myra, you next, and then we're going to go to the funders.
Well, I echo Nick, more. More would be great. We're a little bit more diversified, as I had mentioned. So in terms of us thinking about funders, and, I think it's just, imagine the possibility. Imagine the opportunities with something different. And, I think a lot of times when you have organizations that have a proven track record of social enterprises or fee-for-service or these other not really common operations as opposed compared to other nonprofits, there's something there that is working, and maybe open your mind, open the mind a little bit to what could be. I think that we have been able to, with the funders that we've had, that we've been able to show that, and they've been able to invest in something that's different that they normally wouldn't have invested in, and seen the benefits of it, and then they've been able to offer that out to other nonprofits that are doing the same work, kind of have the same mindset, social enterprise mindset. A lot of times, I will say this, and this is just my soapbox, but I think, and the loans are great, because sometimes you can get really low interest rates and, you know, really good terms, but when that's all that's really offered, that ties our hands as a nonprofit. And that kind of goes back to what Nick said, is if there was a good, healthy combination of grants and good terms on the loan and partnerships that we could, you know, perhaps you won't, it's not in your market, or you don't really invest in that program or that type of business model, but you know others that would. And it's helping us make those connections as well, and expanding our network, because there's somebody out there that would help and would fund what we're doing. We just may not have met them yet. And so I think that speaks volumes.
Great, great. So Heidi, can we come to you first?
Sure. So I really like what Myra said about social enterprises. When we're looking at what's kind of the next phase for our nonprofit partners, especially in smaller communities, if you've got a workforce development program, why not build in some sort of a social enterprise entity? You know, why not create a job opportunity for individuals who are going through your workforce development program that sort of is a stepping stone for them, but also revenue generation? Why not help bring some economics to that community that maybe, you know, currently is listed as like a bedroom community to something else and doesn't really have a major economic driver? Like, think a little more innovatively. Maybe think a little bit more like a for-profit, in the sense, like I tell people all the time, like the biggest difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit is the tax structure. Nobody is saying that a nonprofit can't make money. You know, let's not keep 10 million just sitting over on the side. But you know, thinking through, you don't always need to spend every single dime that comes in that year, and thinking about what do we need to keep as reserves for future projects, but also where can we stretch and grow. And don't be afraid to fail. I like that. What did you say? Fail fast and fail cheap. I'm going to keep that one. I think, you know, come to the table and say, we have an idea, and this is why we think it will work. It may not, and you know, be honest about that. But talk about, if it works, here's that qualitative component that's going to speak volumes ahead of the quantitative. Like, I can say, okay, 50 people were served, but qualitatively, if I know a mother is now moving out of public housing into safe, affordable, for-sale housing, and it's changing the trajectory of her family because of this program, qualitatively, that speaks significantly more to me than, okay, 50 people were helped through this program. So thinking differently about what your revenue streams look like. You know, from a philanthropy perspective, I 100% agree that more philanthropy needs to be driven to rural. What we are facing right now, though, when we look at the federal programs that are being cut / potentially being cut, if you took all the philanthropy that was dispersed across the country, it does not fill the gap of the federal program. And so we've got to figure out, how do we do things differently, and how do we get more people talking about rural investments philanthropically in rural, but also about bringing more flexible capital, because you can't philanthropy a community out of poverty. Mm-hmm. It's a tool, but it needs to be a tool in the larger capital that these communities need.
Just to real quick, So, and the way we say it at OSTI is, these are unprecedented times, and they're going to require unprecedented solutions. And so that's stepping out of the comfort zone for a lot of us, but the times need it.
Kevin?
Yeah, so I love like some of the comments that my colleagues here on the panel have mentioned. You know, there's a lot of change this year in policy and programs. Some positive developments from the bill of July 4th, you know, permanency of new market tax credits. The LIHTC program was changed significantly to allow for smaller projects to be able to occur. And then, you know, opportunity zones, there's a huge benefit now that'll be to rural areas with the Opportunity Zone program in comparison to urban areas. And those lines are going to be redrawn in the next year or so. I think 2027 is perhaps when they go into effect. And so there's a great opportunity to work with the governors of your state to really help make sure that those opportunity zones that are going to be redrawn in those districts will be that much aligned with the needs of the community and the projects that you might have. On the new markets, I've been in that space a long time, and you know, it's complicated, it's expensive, but it's permanent now. And so I think I'm really optimistic about the investment that the practitioners in the industry can do to simplify and streamline those those structures to be able to serve smaller projects. There's already been kind of a set aside within the program for rural areas. We've continually committed to over 20% of our new market tax credit awards to non-metro communities or non-metro areas, and I think that will continue. And I'm very optimistic about that being even that much more efficient. I'm not a good chef. You know, I grew up in Northeast Iowa, and I think all of my recipes are either Instant Pot or casseroles. But I do like lasagna, and like the analogy of like lasagna financing and just, you know, bringing different sources together, you know, philanthropy being leveraged into other products and tools to make projects work. Now, I fully appreciate that when you have a really small project, you can start having transaction costs erode all those different ingredients in your lasagna capital stack. But, you know, there are different ways that philanthropy and state agencies are approaching it now that I think are really helpful in keeping it simple, whether it be like a guarantee or a limited guarantee that can help strengthen the capital stack so that you can attract some of that private capital to be combined with the grant. So just keeping it to maybe 3 ingredients, if you will. I had a 4-ingredient cookbook at one point that was a favorite of mine. Used a lot of mixed soup recipes. But you know, that I think those are simple ways to really try to serve that what might be a smaller project.
Great.
I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to say ditto to a lot of what the panelists said. But the one thing that I would add is that first, I think it's really important that we grow our capital organically and grassroots, right? So we've learned to flex over the past 5 years, and I think we need to keep using that flex muscle. I think talking about the challenges early on and bringing people together to talk about that will also help us generate capital organically. So when you have a project that needs funding and you bring a broad group of people to the table, I think creative juices start to flow and people know about different sources that can come to the table for that particular project. And I think through having those early conversations, even at the conceptual level where we have a need and we have a concept of how we might resolve that need, will help drive additional capital to the table as people get excited about the project. They have a need for their employees to have safe, affordable housing or whatever the project is bringing to the table. I think those early conversations where many people are at the table and hearing what the need is and how this will resolve it will also organically generate additional sources of capital given the times we're in.
I think that's really great information. The last question that I do have, one of you all, I think it must have been Nick that said, think like a for-profit.
Huh?
Nick said, that was Heidi. Think like a for-profit. I love that. I'm gonna, I'm gonna steal that. But we would all benefit if we started thinking like for-profits in the room. You can feel like a nonprofit, but think like feel like a nonprofit, think like a for-profit. So Heidi actually touched upon something else that really goes into the last question, and it is really about how do you define success measures outcome when you talked about the mother who now no longer lives in the different home. So how do you define and measure outcomes, and how can rural groups better tell their impact stories? Like bringing that information to the front. How can they better do that? Myra, do you want to start? Because like I figure you and Nick do a really great job of that, and so how do you do that?
So it goes all back to the human factor. I think the stories of your community can tell the story better than you can. Always try and capture stories of your mission and action, of the actual impact made on the families and in the communities, and not just directly, but indirectly as well. That speaks volumes. Long after you've left the room, there's stories they can refer back to. I also think that we have to have we have to have a conversation, and it's a larger conversation on how we define outcomes and how we define metrics and how we define success, I think. For a long time, everything is and still is based on number of units, number of widgets, number of people. And yes, that's great, that tells a story, but there's so much more we're missing, I think. And we need to dig a little deeper. We need to have that conversation with funders, with each other, and push for something that we can tell the story, and we can drive the change by saying, in our, this is how many homes we built, this is how many households we served, but this is how many kids went to college because they said they had a home now, and follow that term. That's something that you don't really hear reported, and it's maybe anecdotal, but there's nothing really concrete to state. There's a lot more, I think, that we can, a lot of work to do in how we measure success and how we define those metrics.
I love that. What about you, Nick?
So Coca-Cola spends about 20 to 25% of its budget on marketing and PR and comms. How many out there spend 25% of your budget on marketing, PR, and comms? Raise your hand. That's our problem. Coca-Cola does commercials that doesn't even say drink Coke. It just has this thing sitting in front of them. We need to talk about what we do better than we are now. And it really, I look at our budget and it's like, are you kidding me? I don't can spend that much money on that. But and it's got to be strategic, and you got to figure out how it's working in your region and how you're spending it, and who you're hiring to do it, and that kind of thing. But I mean, I was in this on the session yesterday about hiring young people. A lot of them know communications and comms very well and want to get started in something, but it's a place to go. But that's, I think, so being committed to telling that story, because we say those words all the time, tell the story, right? But what does that mean? It also means collecting the data, because that story has data behind it, right? And so, if you would be amazed if you just thought through all the data points that you are all getting as you're building a new house for a family, or renting a house, or educating a child, or lending money. Like, find those data metrics and collect them and keep them. We're all kind of wondering about how do we use AI. That's one of the ways, and is to collect that and then tell folks about this, right? And then start thinking of very creative ways to talk about who you are and what you do. So one of the things the other day, as I'm bored, I'm regularly bored. And I was looking at the internet, and I realized that CDCB's budget is bigger than the Port of Brownsville's budget annually. And I was like, holy crap. like the whole world needs to know this. You know, like our investment in this community is bigger than the Port of Brownsville. And, you know, you got to show it, you got to prove it. But if those type of things that I say that in a room and everybody's like, oh, wow, really? Either Nick's lying, which could be possible, you know, or this is incredible. Like, how does all this work? So telling that story means knowing what you're doing and how you're affecting the population. And it isn't just the number of houses, the number of students, the number of, you know, the dollar amounts. When you do talk about those things, those are real people, and telling that story. So our communication team, real quick, does a fact sheet, really a story sheet every single month about a family that's come through our program and who they were, where they went, you know, what happened, how we helped them, and what's going on. And then that goes out to everybody that we know. And it's a set template, but it's pictures and they know, and it gets done. So you just make it part of what you're doing, and it's not something special, but it's like writing a grant, because that's what it is. You're writing a grant.
Stacy.
I know I'm not a practitioner and I don't want to jump on Nick's question, but I think there's something really important that you mentioned that people often don't think of up front, and that's the collection of the data. So you think about the data related to your project, right? But you don't think about the ancillary outcomes that come with that project. And so those are really hard to capture on the back end, right? If you're like, oh, maybe we should have figured out how many students graduated from high school because we got them into permanent housing, right? Try to think about those things up front because they're so much easier to capture, and they really do help make the story real, right? And it's not just about the housing, it's about all the additional outcomes that came from that stable housing. So I hope you don't mind me jumping.
No, yeah, jump.
But
Go.
that's something you don't think about
Preach
often
it, sister, preach
is
it.
what are the ancillary data points I need to capture? And if you think about that up front and you start capturing it upon intake and at the beginning of the project, you will have a very fulsome set of data that you can take and show as the results of that entire project.
All right.
I would just say that please let us know how we can help in telling the story, and even demand of us, like when you're the qualitative components that you're delivering are extremely valuable. And so I think, like Nick was highlighting earlier about the positioning of the conversation of, like, ask the funder, like, how are you going to help promote this work that we are doing together? You know, and then one thing that we're really trying to achieve right now is coordination and support of the message for the CDFI industry. You know, we met with a bunch of other funders at OFN a couple of weeks ago, colleagues here as well as other financial institutions, foundations, to really try to come together and figure out how we can help convey the message and tell the message from a funder perspective and funder support on the great work of the CDFI industry and all the work that it does in across the nation, in red and blue states all over. So you know, please, like, be like rough with us, if you will, and let us know, like, how we can help support and tell the message, because it takes a big budget, and I don't know that anybody has that Coca-Cola type budget, but we can help, and it's valuable information, valuable qualitative stories.
So I'll be quick. Two suggestions, because I agree with everything that's been said here. First, go back to some projects that have maybe been online for a while and talk to some of those individuals. Because about, you know, how did this impact you? Like, what was the benefit of this? And that will get you to some of those non-traditional data points that then as you move forward, you can think about, okay, at this point in time, let's start tracking this for this project so that you have that more holistic story to tell. Something that I thought about when you said the Coca-Cola budget, I was like, wow, 25%. Could not tell you what our marketing budget is. It's not 25%. Yes, it's not. But We literally just finished last week a big skills-based volunteerism event where we partnered with some of our nonprofit partners to bring in teammates with specific skill sets. Coffee's wearing off, to address some issues that they had or work on some projects. Leverage some of your partners and say, hey, do you have somebody in your marketing department? That's from a CRA perspective, that is skills-based volunteerism that we can qualify. But think about your board members. Some of them are looking for opportunities for their teams to engage, and this is a way to say, hey, do you have somebody on your team that might be willing to volunteer a couple hours to have a conversation and help us whiteboard some ideas? So think about how you can leverage partners, not just for funding, but for the skills that they have on their teams that you don't have to pay for. You get pro bono.
Those are some really great suggestions. I think the one thing that you all said, kind of like the common theme